Chapter 40. Whatever Layla had expected to find at the end of her hours-long march over the sandy sea, this wasn't it. She stood at the trunk of a tree nearly a dozen paces wide and with its head in the stars. Its roots were like trees themselves, and they spread so far out. And around the tree she had first encountered one... Its roots were like trees themselves, and they spread so far out and around the tree that she first had encountered one sticking out of the ground 3 bow shots back. And yet somehow, it wasn't the size of the tree which proved the strangest part. It was that the tree was ever changing. Depending on the angle from which Layla looked, it shifted and changed. She saw every tree along the edge of the wood and 100 others she couldn't have even begun to imagine. This one tree was every tree, and yet none of them at all. For maker knows how long, Layla walked around it, eyes scrunched up and mouth hanging open. With each step, the bark shifted, moving from smooth to rough, from dark and then to light. The leaves changed as well, one moment large and green, with finger-like extrusions. The next moment, they morphed to shapes like raindrops and colored in a multitude of browns and oranges. There were fruits sometimes, and they changed just as much. Berries of all sizes and colors, apples, and things which looked like apples, but with a fuzzy outer layer that reminded her of poor Tuck. Oh, poor Tuck. Purple and blue Hiawatha fruits, and a dozen others that she couldn't name. Layla paused her march and ran her fingers through her hair, turning to look out at the endless sea of sand once more. The tree cast no shadow. In fact, she hadn't seen any shadow at all since she'd been here, including her own. The only sources of light were the stars above, and yet Layla felt as though she could see as clearly as though it were day. That sounds very large. She hadn't seen another soul. No towns, no people, no lights on the horizon. Nothing. She must have walked miles and hadn't caught a hint of life. In fact, walking had only raised more strange questions. The going had been long and tough, and yet she wasn't tired or thirsty. Layla bit her lip. It was just her and this tree in this strange place. Though she supposed having the tree was better than nothing, at least it was interesting. She was a handful of paces away from the trunk. From this angle, the bark of the tree appeared smooth, and orange fruits the size of cauldrons dangled from thorny branches above. She longed to taste one of them, and could feel saliva pooling in her mouth at the thought of it. She stepped closer to the tree, keeping the same angle as best she could, though still the tree shimmered and morphed into a willow with long, mossy leaves, with tiny berries growing in thick patches. One of those bunches dangled close enough to touch. She raised her hand, reaching for just one of those small little fruits, and stopped. Her hand had changed. No, not changed exactly. It was the blood beneath her fingernails. It had turned black and moldy, spreading down her knuckles to the back of her hand. Like a plague, the color worked its way over her body. She wanted to retch. The tree forgotten, she twisted about, looking for somewhere, anywhere, to wash the blood free before it spread further. Layla's heart pounded in her ears, a deafening thud, 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 making her vision blur at the edges with each beat. She felt certain this plague would spread, would cover her whole body. She had to do something, had to find something to help, had to... Layla? A voice? No, not just a voice, one she knew. Layla looked up and saw her brother walking toward her, dressed just as he'd been the night before, or it had been 2 nights before. His eyes looked more sunken than usual, though they were wider now than Layla had ever seen them. He was covered in blood, too, and soot, and he smelled like a campfire that had been smoking rotten meat. But he was here. She ran toward him, already crying and falling, but scrambling toward him because now she wasn't alone. "Stay back," Ollie said, raising his hand, palm outstretched as though to shove her away. Layla skidded to a stop in the stupefied obedience that comes with shock. "What?" "Oh, I know a trick when I see it." A trick? Oliver Riker, I'm your sister." She choked on the last word, falling to her knees. The beating in her ears had gotten louder, "and I'm scared." Ollie hesitated, looking around and flexing his fingers. "Where are we? And what is that?" Layla had forgotten about the tree, though she could see the reflection of it in Ollie's eyes. Layla shook her head, sobs shaking her chest. I don't know." She hated herself for crying, but she couldn't stop. Soon Ollie would see her hands, and he'd know she was a monster. He wouldn't want to touch her, to talk to her. Suddenly, Layla felt certain Ollie would leave the moment he knew. She leaned forward and shoved her hands into the sand, hiding them to her wrists. There was a sigh, and Layla could feel, more than hear, Ollie approach. "Is it really you?" He stood above her, and she could hear the sand shift as he crouched beside her. Layla didn't say a word, only shook her head. She was so confused, so lost. Seeing Ollie should have been salvation, but instead her head pounded, and 1,000 thoughts impaled her mind between each loud thud. She remembered Ollie leaving, thud. Mother waking her up, leaving too, thud. Lightning and fire, death and swords, thud. The blood on her hands. She had killed, thud. Ollie was speaking. Had he stopped? "Look, we'll figure this out, right? It's a lot, but we'll be okay." Ollie shifted again, and Layla felt his hand touch her shoulder. It was warm and kind, the feeling of awkward love between brother and sister. This was Ollie, and he loved her, and he would protect her. But that love and warmth was fleeting, there and then gone, for just as Layla was leaning into his embrace, pain ripped through her body. Layla screamed, jerking away and grabbing her shoulder, feeling for a knife or hot poker, which must have been stabbed there. Ollie screamed too, but his screams quickly faded, pulled away into the far distance. The world changed. The sand and the tree disappeared, replaced by 1,000 flashing images. She understood none of them. All pictures of places she had never seen, with people and beasts that looked unfamiliar and dressed strangely. But the pain never abated, only growing stronger as Ollie's voice faded into the distance. The pain grew until every inch of her body seemed to be trying to rip itself apart. She watched as her fingernails ripped away, as the bones of her hand snapped, all to a backdrop of images of an ever-changing people and world. And then, like the lid of a coffin snapping shut, there was darkness.